struggling just as hard as we are to survive in this economy and this form of governance because, it's rough out here. Welcome back to welcome back to Four Mortal Coils, the hottest podcast in from the the West Coast to the. I was going to say Midwest, but I'm like, we're not in the Midwest.
To the Bible Belt.
Yeah, to the Bible Belt. Coming to you, definitely not live. Anyways, I'm Bray. I'm joined here by Steven and Trevor. And you are our glorious fourth mortal coil this evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today's topic is capitalism killing us. We'll find out. And you'll have all your questions answered right here in the span of the next hour and a half. No, that's a lie. Because this is a very big topic that honestly, just thinking about the things that I would want to talk about already was like, this could be several episodes.
Yeah, we're not going to get to all of it. And
we're not. No.
The topic simply encapsulates too much about the way that our reality is at this time. But I've got some things to dive into. Mainly, the question sort of explains it, but it's mainly like, is this working at this point in 2024, year of our Lord? Is capitalism working? Are we seeing an uptrend? Are things getting better? Are things getting worse? I know what I would answer, but we may say that things are getting worse, but not attribute it to capitalism. And capitalism is a vague word. I'll be honest. There's a lot going on in our system of government, but what I'm really talking about here is sort of the a few different facets. Overt corporate power in the United States. The prevalence of the 1%, the people who are titans of industry who control like more wealth than everyone else, like combined or however it is. I forget the exact statistic, of like that's not correct. I'm trying to say is what's up?
Hey Bray, you turned into like 4
Robot.
Pixels. Yeah, we can only get one. I'm not getting any words.
It's getting worse.
It's getting worse.
I'm melting.
Oh my god!
It sounds like dial-up. It's giving dial-up.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like dial-up. Sounds like a fax machine.
Being torn apart and my atoms are being reassembled somewhere else. Oh boy. Let's see.
It's big internet. It's big
internet.
It is.
Yeah, it's big internet. He's gone.
He started talking about capitalism and big internet. Got it?
Yeah. Elon Musk went in and shot him right in the face.
Oh, man.
He's dead.
Hey, we will never record this episode.
No, it's not happening. Every time we try, we get shut down. We'll see him when we see him. Damn. Right.
We're back. All right. Anyway, as I was saying before, big internet cut me off. I guess I was talking about is capitalism working? Is it not working?
In the year of our Lord 2024.
In the year of our Lord 2024. Very good, very good. And then I think I was going on to talk about capitalism being a vague word, and there's multiple different ways to go at it, from sort of the overt corporate presence in the United States. The power that they wield, the ability to lobby and things of that nature, and then the 1% of people who are titans of industry and own this inconceivable amount of wealth.
More wealth than Smaug, actually.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Like, seriously, I think they've done the math. Like, the volume of gold you could pack into the mountain. Yeah, I think Bezos has more wealth than Smaug.
And that's a perfect example, because I was just about to plug, I hope it's still up, there's a thing you can go to. It's better on the mobile device because you're swiping. I think it's intended for like an iPhone or something. It's Jeff Bezos's net worth visualized on like a mobile device, and it's like a bar chart, but it's just one big bar, and you just keep swiping, and it's red. Like the pixels, they have a little pixel like compass thing to, or like guide to tell you how much this is actually worth. and as you are swiping through, it'll like show like a slightly larger block and be like, oh, the how much money it would take to give free healthcare to veterans every year, and you just keep going. It's like, oh, how to cure this preventable disease, and you just keep going and going and going. That's available. Check that out. Anyways, capitalism.
Right.
It's what's for dinner tonight and every night in this country. But we're going to talk about it
in this
and I've got
God's land, America.
Lots. I've got lots of notes. I've got some books over here. You can't see them. I've got 5 different books, and these are just the ones I could take quickly off the shelf that I have read that are more or less heavy critiques of capitalist themes in here. I'm actually only a third of the way through this one. I got this one.
I really think this is going to be interesting because, like, I don't know. Just to hop in here real quick, I know that Bray is probably going to be the hardest hitting person we have against capitalism, and to be honest with you, I've dreaded this meeting topic. I mean, like, I don't want to talk about it, but I'm happy to be here. Do not mistake me, and it's going to be fun. But like, I don't know. I have completely unresolved feelings about capitalism, about like what I like to refer to as the free market. You know what I mean? And I'm sure we'll bring all that sort of thing up. And I don't know. I find myself probably much like you, dear listener, with more questions than answers. You know, I have a hobby level interest in economics, but I'm a data scientist, so I'm not afraid of like the numbers or anything. So we will see. We will see.
Trevor, any opening thoughts?
Sure. So I don't particularly have.
I love capitalism.
Well, actually, I don't mean to take that perspective entirely, and I don't actually have that perspective. I think, what's that phrase that what's his name? Fucking Jordan Peterson uses? Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, that sort of thing.
You got to do it with the accent.
And like the Kermit the Frog voice, like that. Yeah.
What about the baby in the bathwater?
Yeah, I can't do that. But
look, he's betrayed us. Okay.
Yeah,
don't care.
Fair. But I will say, I'm one of those people where I think that I am not presently aware of, in the paradigm of 2024, I'm not presently aware of a system which could completely supplant and replace the free enterprise with a system which is superior to it in every respect. I think, like anything else, if I were to introduce a full, I don't know, insert total command economy system into our country, I think you'll have a situation that will also create a milieu of various problems. Whatever economic system you create will swell up and sweat problems in the same sense that ours has. But that's not to say that our system, our problem shouldn't be ignored, that sort of thing. And I do think we have, as a country in the year 2024, a year of our Lord, we have very serious problems. I think of our time period.
There are several socioeconomic problems in the hood.
This is yeah. A single tear drips out of my eye, for there are many socioeconomic problems. It's not all good.
Brilliant.
No, but I look at our time period. I look at this part of the 21st century, very similar to the way that we now look back and think of the Gilded Age, a time period with need of severe change, where there are a lot of monopolies around. And while you pass some laws, if you pass some laws and some legislation and go through with the Theodore Roosevelt type, let's say, a guy with a big toothy grin and those weird circular glasses and like a really, really large upper body for some reason, and just go over there and like just break up all these monopolies, you could have a system that can create a wildly large industry that can lead towards the information age. But you can't have that unless you have some sort of free enterprise. But you can't have that kind of free enterprise that actually has good things without passing legislation and laws that eliminate the inerrancies and the problems that are presently in your country. That is to say, that you do need to pass laws to circumvent corruption. You do need to pass laws that circumvent monopolies. You do need to do things that help unions. You do need to do things that, as strange as it sounds, also circumvent like large union structures as well. There are many things you have to do constantly. It's a bit of like homeostasis, where you constantly have to play around with the notions and the objects and the ideas in order to have a system with the least amount of problems as possible. We'll only be led into newer and more novel problems. But all of this is to say that we exist right now in a time where there's nothing inherently wrong with the free market, but there is something wrong with our free market. And that is essentially where my perspective is.
Thank you for that. So before we get too far in the weeds here, I'll tell you why I decided to go with this topic this week. And it's a topic that's been swirling around in my head, and I'll be honest, I kind of had the same position as Steven. Like, I was like, man, this is a hell of a beast to bear. Like, I don't know if I'm ready for this yet. But an interesting thing happened last week, or I guess it was just a few days ago. My sense of time is all over the place. I blame COVID. I don't know what day of the week, what time it was at any given point. But so we'll just say last week, I was playing Cyberpunk 2077, as I have been doing. I'm nearing the end of it, and if anybody is not familiar, this is a game set in the future, hence the title, in a world not much unlike ours. In fact, it is the world that Mike Pondsmith and friends have created, which has existed long before this game came out, I believe in 2020 or so. This world that they have created is so... you will just continually be reminded of something while playing, or even while reading the other content, the tabletop content as well. And you'll go, wow, that is so similar to, and then you'll just have, and you'll pause and go, oh, wait, no, that's literally what it is. And I had one of these moments last week. I was playing a mission where I meet this guy who like sells you cars in the game. And you meet him on top this hill overlooking the city. And, this is like a goofy character, but he has this moment of like really serious, dialogue or whatever. And so you go over and you're like, hey, dude, is everything okay? And he just starts on this monologue about the neighborhood that you're looking over, which is this sort of rundown, poor neighborhood. I think it's called Santo Domingo in the game. And he tells you about this is where he grew up. And he asks your character, he's like, you want to know what we were all afraid of most when we were kids growing up? And this is a place where like gangs are everywhere, and like there's violence and
unmitigated and violence, pretty
exactly
much.
And
like
so
Grand Theft Auto level violence,
right. And so whatever you say and to the dialogue, he's like, no, it was actually a glass of water, just a regular glass of water, because you never knew which sip would be your last, because of the poor quality of drinking water due to the mega corporations that were polluting the local groundwater. And I just kind of sat there and I was like, damn, that's fucked up.
That
and
hurt.
It was either just before I was playing that mission or right afterward that I heard the announcement that the Supreme Court had overturned the Chevron decision, which, if you're also unfamiliar, if I'm not butchering this, basically previously, before it was overturned, when there was, say, like ambiguity regarding a law, like for example, don't put toxic chemicals in, dump toxic chemicals in water, or like, bodies of water, or pollute the groundwater. However ambiguous that might be, typically, if there was a challenge or if there was an issue, those sorts of decisions, I believe, were deferred to agencies like,
the EPA,
hypothetical, like EPA, or hypothetical, we
the FDA,
know we have all the scientific data about the pollution of groundwater in this building. This is our agency. It would be deferred to them. Well, what's happened now that this is overturned, again, if I'm not being incorrect here,
you're not
is
a legal expert.
Right. no legal expert here. Those decisions are now being deferred to courts instead of the people with all of the data, which is a concern for me because I'm very privy. I'm to the scientific data. I think that's a pretty helpful thing to have, and the courts aren't going to have that. They might have suggestions, but if the courts are any example of what's to come of recent, I'm a little bit worried by that. And so it was just one of those moments that I was like, man, this is just literally unfolding before my very eyes. So I was like, that combined with all of these other different things, not to say that this decision by the Supreme Court is any direct tie to capitalism. I'm just talking about capitalism and what it has produced will be the vehicle by which these sort of potential hazards come to fruition, such as depicted in the game. So that's why we're here to talk about this. Is capitalism killing us, and we don't even know it, or we do know it and we're not doing anything about it, or we're doing everything within our power, but we can't do anything about it because we're so powerless as the little tiny ants at the bottom of the food chain? I don't know. So yeah. I'll say this too. I think capitalism is brilliant when it comes to economic growth. I don't think anybody could deny that. I think even Karl Marx said that, capitalism has produced some of the greatest, wonders, or however the quote goes, or something like that. And it would have never been produced without capitalism. But I think for many other things, it is terrible. The sort of conditions that it can create, I think, in my opinion, it makes things ripe for exploitation. There are certain things I don't believe should be for profit, such as your health.
I have a
the
question.
list goes on.
I have a question real quick, and this may spur us on,
Sure.
to get us going. First off, I don't really want to get into the medical side. We should maybe even like do that as a topic itself. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because like I think that's such a big question just by itself.
I do have an anecdote for that, but we don't have to dive into
it. No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like we can talk about it. It's just like we should dive into that as a subtopic for sure. But the real question I wanted to ask was, do we think that the process, the discipline of science, can exist, outside of a free market type of idea? And here's what I want to bring up. So one of the objectives of capitalism, one of the objectives of a free market, seems to be that economic growth we're talking about. And so one way that economic growth is achieved is by producing so many pieces of equipment that their price falls to a manageable level. In other words, there are far more lab beakers that are out there than will ever be used.
Right.
But it has to be that way it has to be that way so that they're cheap enough to buy. Mm-hmm. If everyone only bought one beaker, we would save a lot of energy, we would save a lot of greenhouse gases, we would save a lot of all this, that, and the other, but the beaker would be prohibitively expensive. Maybe that says something more about humans. Maybe we'll talk about that here in a moment. But what I'm trying to say is that outside of a free market system, it just feels like none of what I have in my lab available to my students would be available. It feels like all of these commodities would be totally just prohibitively expensive, and we simply couldn't afford to do the labs that we do. And how are we supposed to train new scientists if we're afraid that a beaker costs more than a week's or whatever salary. I don't know.
Well,
Mhm.
well, it's complicated because like when I think of like when we talk of cost, that's what we're speaking of now, and like how much a beaker would cost to you. I think we're still framing it in reference to a capitalist system above us.
Well, time out.
Overall.
So just to clarify, just make sure you're on my same page, Trevor.
Hmm.
What I mean to say is, and of course you would know this, you play with data all the time. The more people we have working on science, the process of science, the more discoveries we're going to make. Like,
Certainly.
in other words, if we did a bell curve on that, the ones that are making the tops over here that are making all the discoveries, there are simply more of them. Even though the bell curve is all the same, there's simply more of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it's very similar to the way our healthcare works in the United States. The reason that they say that we have the best healthcare in the world is not because we actually do provide the best healthcare in the world. It's because we spend so much money on healthcare that we are constantly making new improvements and innovations and things, and coming up with new technologies. It's a similar principle.
I think, Stephen, I think your idea has legs. I think it does. Like we're speaking of like the scientific paradigm as we currently have it in the United States and really just across the world. Because like fundamentally the world is like this globalist thing and everyone's trading. It's more or less just a free enterprise market across most of the planet at this point. Such a degree that it's not about the country, it's about the planet in a lot of regards. I think that your idea has legs, that science, insofar as you don't have a system of that sort, science degrades and decreases. I do think that there's value
No,
there.
so just real quick, I want to make sure once again we're on the same page.
Mm.
So the scientific process, what I mean to say is, would slow down. It wouldn't degrade. We wouldn't
Well,
we
that's
wouldn't magically
synonymous
lose.
and synonymous in my framing
Hmm.
here. What I'm saying is quite literally just the amount of people that innovate what you would call science
Hmm.
decreases. The amount of people capable of doing so decreases, and the volume of
Sure.
human beings making that work would go down. So I think in that sense, you and I are touching on the same thing.
Sure.
So I think your idea has legs there. But when I come back to it, and what I brought up initially was the idea that, well, there's no capitalism, and now my beaker's more expensive. It's confusing. I'm trying to touch on this. What I'm trying to say right now is, well, that's still within like a buying spending paradigm, which is itself more or less a what are we talking about here? Because it's really difficult for me to leave this painting. Quite literally, like the entire paradigm from which I approach reality, you could call that entire system capitalism, and it's very difficult for me to escape psychologically from it and approach it from any other paradigm. Because what I'm trying to do
It
is
is
escape
tough.
out of the It's tough.
Right.
I'm trying to escape out of the capitalist paradigm, instead look at it as a total command economy. That's what I'm presently trying to do.
Okay.
And I'm trying to show it like the USSR, for example. You would be provided a certain set amount of beakers for your science lab. That's what you would be given. If you were a nuclear physicist working in
But
Leningrad,
we know
let's
that
say,
doesn't work.
we know it doesn't work. And that was another tangent I was going to get on. But I'm trying to think of other examples of the system at large, and exactly other ways you could approach this problem that we currently have now. When we say is capitalism killing us, it's killing us a lot less quickly than communism was back when. And
Yeah, they went
we
through
have
humans like it was a sausage
exactly
factory. I mean,
like
Mhm.
yeah.
like
So
literally put them in the grinder and just
yeah, meat grinder, yeah,
humans go burr.
yeah, the Holodomor, all that kind of thing.
Mhm.
You have to do a game of comparisons, a game of contrasts, and it's difficult for me to abstract a paradigm which kills people less quickly. So here's an example.
That's our line. That's our template. We're going from
Wherever you
what can
go,
we do that will kill people the least quickly?
Yeah.
yes, yeah. So my example here is,
Well, think about it. Think just real quick,
Mhm,
Trevor. I
please.
love how we're approaching this. Literally, both of us, and probably all three of us. Uh, how can you not approach an economy through the utilitarian aspect? Like it literally is numbers. It literally is demonstrable numbers. It's like, okay, we need to make a system that does the least harm to the fewest number of people, or the most good to the greatest number of people.
Right. And it seems to me, and this is a tangent in itself, that if you create a command economy where there's somebody in charge that is told to provide, or tells everyone that I need to provide, okay, 100 beakers over there, 300 bushels of wheat over there. When you tell one person to be in charge of the entire economy, or one Politburo to be in charge of the entire economy, and let no individuals go out there and seek their own private property and their own private income and their own private individual capital, you create a system at large which overall fails. It's like this. So when I think of very often, I'm usually very against a lot of social welfare programs, generally speaking, for the following reason. I think as an individual, Bray, let's say you make I don't know, $2,500 like every 2 weeks or something. You're gonna be, you know what? Let's say you're on like a different end here. Let's say you make like $1,200 every 2 weeks. Like let's say you're on like a lower or that kind of rung, or maybe even less than that. It doesn't matter. Let's say you only make $600 every 2 weeks. When that happens,
X amount of money.
I keep on decreasing, but I'm trying to put emphasis on how important this money is to you. You don't have a lot of it. You only have $600 every 2 weeks, and you need to make sure you spend it to the best of your ability. So you can kind of think of it. I'm building an engine here. You can kind of think of the wasted money, the money that you waste on useless nonsense, as sort of entropy or sweat or lost funds, according to you.
Okay.
And you have exactly.
Including taxes. Taxes are entropy.
And it's mistakes made, like things that you don't factor in that essentially are failings of your system, of your model that you're trying to use in order to be successful, to generate capital for yourself.
God, I forgot to cancel my Hulu subscription.
Exactly. Like you had it free for two. You had it free for a month.
Cancel my taxes.
You forgot to turn it off.
And they just increased the subscription price again.
You're right. Or like you accidentally don't get to your car in time before you get like a parking ticket or something.
Oh, like in New Orleans.
Like
oh man, that was
there
rough.
You go. Let's say you fuck up every week and you get a parking ticket every week. That's a lot of entropy. It is, and you pay a huge
the American dream.
Or speeding tickets all the time. Yeah, you pay up the ass. So basically, you try your very hardest as an individual to decrease the amount of that entropy as much as physically possible, so that out of the $600 you get every 2 weeks, you only waste, let's say, like ideally like less than $40, and that's essentially the go towards. So at the end of the day, really, to spend on necessities and your things you actually want, you have roughly about $560 every 2 weeks, and that's what you work with. So basically, what I'm saying is that degree of entropy, that percentage, is unilaterally shared on many different levels. That is to say that if you, instead of having you specifically worry about your money and only lose about $40, let's say instead of all of that, instead of getting $600 every 2 weeks, you get about $150, and the rest of it gets sent away to the government, let's say, whether it's state or federal government. And then there's somebody in charge of all of the money of all of those individuals across the state and across the federal system, whose job it is to take care of your social welfare and that sort of thing, and just various things like that. So what I'm saying is that person dealing with all that money will necessarily have an entropy gradient considerably larger than what you yourself were potentially. You would have. What I'm saying here as a synopsis is, you would have made much better use of that $450 over what an entire social welfare program could have done. There would have been so many mistakes
that's
made,
where I would disagree.
Generally speaking. Please go on.
I would really like to hear Bray's thoughts on this.
And I totally understand. And matter of fact, Trevor, I think you've partially explained this line of thinking to me before, and because it was sounding very familiar. So what I would say in response to that is that while what we're talking about is some government entity that is taking in the money, and it's the government that is using the money, we would say we could even say their margin of error, or whatever you wanted to call that, loss of money, is the risk is much higher for them to put it blatantly, screw everything up, or accidentally cancel 5 million Hulu subscriptions,
or some guy to siphon it away due to like corruption or just stuff like that. Every country, wherever you go, will have some degree of corruption, some degree of mismanagement of funds. Just naturally speaking, money gets sent into places which, at the end of the day,
and just mistakes.
Right? And these mistakes, just like the mistakes that you make privately, However, it's just on a much, much, much higher scale. And in the end, a lot more money is wasted than what could have been used by you, the individual who had it in the first place.
But it depends on how you look at that, because if the government takes $5 of my money and then wastes my $5 along with a bunch of other people's money, they've still only wasted $5 of my money. It's not as if those other people's money was my money as well. My angle against that is that while that is the case, the potential to do something beneficiary, the power that money holds, is exponential compared to what I could do with it at that point. This is how something like universal health care would work. Instead of me paying thousands and thousands of dollars for my own care, I'm paying a much, much smaller fraction out of whatever, but I can get whatever I need at little or no cost to me.
Well, so here's the thing. This is where it gets complicated. I personally am not a libertarian. I'm not going to tell you that I don't think people when they retire should get social, what is that called?
Sure. Social Security.
Social Security at the end of their life. Like I'm not
only
insane.
You would know the words like axon, acetylcholine, and so on, but not Social Security. You know what I mean? Like, only you.
You know what's funny? I was trying to think of the word for Social Security this morning with a friend for coffee, and I couldn't think of it then either. I swear to God. We were talking about like discretionary versus mandatory spending of the United States, and like the topic of Social Security came up, which is literally all of our mandatory budget, which is half of the budget of the United States. It's wild. Like basically half of the money that you put into the government is just in Social Security. That's all it is. And then like a quarter of it is the defense spending. And then the other quarter is everything else. So like infrastructure, Medicaid, Medicare, all of that stuff, which is fascinating. And then of course we spend way more than we should. So the whole thing is like, it's not necessarily the money you put in, it's the money you put in. And they also spend a lot of extra things for just reasons. Anyway, so this is where it gets quite complicated, because I'm not a libertarian. I won't tell you for a second that I don't think I should ever put any money into the country. Because obviously we need police officers, we need firefighters, we need that sort of thing. This is one of those things.
Where we're going, we
do need roads, and we're doing quite terribly with our infrastructure.
The libertarians put that on their flag. We're going, we don't need roads.
Right?
I mean,
libertarian.
That's the funny thing. We're not going to build roads. We don't need them.
I would love to see high-speed rail. Like, there's talk right now of like they're trying to in California. It's failing terribly, and that's a sign of like mismanagement. And also like just the complexities of trying to build high-speed rail in California. But there's talk and trade around. There's nothing on the floor at all, but there's talk around of building a high-speed rail from Dallas to Austin. Like there are conversations like this. I think they're fascinating and wonderful. I would love to see the version of high-speed rail that China has in the United States. I think it would go a long way. I think it would be a beautiful thing to have. So I'm not going to be the person offering a libertarian viewpoint. But when we talk about these things, I do think even when we talk about the fundamental things, such as infrastructure, there is going to be entropy. There is going to be corruption. We're going to do our very best. This is the United States. Believe it or not, because we're such nihilists, we think it's terrible. We aren't that bad in terms of corruption compared to most other countries. Like I know. Like I say that you roll your eyes because like this is everything here is on fire.
Oversight.
There's so much on fire here. There's so much terrible stuff. Realistically, we do have corruption. That's a matter of fact, but it's considerably abated compared to most other places and most of our time in history. And it has more to do with the fact that we have a free press constantly reporting it, that you feel as if we have extreme corruption.
That's what I was trying to say. We have such oversight. We have so much oversight.
Yes, it means that you have a censor in your life, that is to say the news and news articles, that constantly visualizes it. Like, for example, I live in a place in California where like we have this email thing where you constantly get an email like automatically whenever any sort of crime activity happens. And you could be mistaken to believe that just means there's crime here all the time, because every single time somebody gets stabbed, a homeless guy gets naked and runs into a Starbucks and screams on top of his lungs. I swear to God, 2 weeks ago, a dude like tries to like pull a gun on somebody else. There's a shooting of some sort. Like somebody tries to get mugged, that kind of thing. You could see all that and go, this is a wildly dangerous place. But it's no more or less dangerous than a lot of places in the United States. Now you're going to hear, well, that's terrible. Well, what I'm trying to say is there's a sensor.
They're pulling the veil
you
back,
see it.
and you're like,
yeah. If you had lived,
I know too much.
Yeah, if you had lived in Dallas, let's say, where I'm actually from, this stuff happens every single day. You just don't ever hear
every minute of every day.
Every minute of every day. And this is one of those things where like you could visualize the system and say it's perfectly corrupt. Complete total tangent, has nothing to do with what Bray wanted to talk about this episode.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, but I do think it's important to say, and this is where I'll end. This is one of those things where now we have to talk about what is necessary. That's the discussion now.
Sure.
Because you and I can agree that we need roads. There are things we also want. I would love to have high-speed rail. I'll put money towards a high-speed rail.
Right.
I'll pay taxes towards high-speed rail, even though I know some of the money will be wasted and will be lost to corruption or some other such thing. So now it becomes a discussion.
Just construction problems. I mean,
and construction problems.
We don't even have to talk about construction. I mean, excuse me, corruption. There's 1,001 ways that money could be mismanaged.
Yeah, when the rubber hits the road, you have problems. That's a fact of life. So now it's a question of what we consider to be necessary. And that's where the discussion goes at the end of the day, between someone like you and someone like me. Libertarian would have a very different argument.
I'm sorry, whenever you guys started saying all the construction corruption, my mind immediately went to negotiation. We've lost all communication.
What the fuck?
Star Wars Episode 1.
I would just like to, go back a smidge to what Trevor's talking about, right?
Okay.
And just suggest how I feel about it and how I could dumb it down, so to speak. Okay. So I completely get what Trevor is saying in this way, dear listener, whoever's out there. If we let's say that we took 1 million people who all need to pay $1 towards something, okay? But instead we decide to nationalize that service or whatever. Now there's $1 million in one pot that's doing this function or service or good or whatever you want to call it. If there are only 5 people managing that account and one of them screws it up, there's so much spending power localized to a few individuals that can be totally and just fucked. I mean, just completely fucked.
Power. There's too much power in too few hands in that circumstance.
I don't want to say power because we are talking about economics here.
I would say power. I would.
I know, but that's why I said spending power. Like, in other words, dear listener, what is spending power? Just as a quick aside, if you go to a grocery store right now and you buy toilet paper or paper towels or whatever, you have used your spending power to get that unit of item. Well, let's say in a couple years inflation makes it higher. Well, you still spend the spending power to get that item. Just because it costs more money, I mean, your spending power hasn't changed except that you have less money because there's literally inflation and so on. Mm-hmm. In other words, your spending power of a single dollar has gone down, but that paper towel is the same thing. So anyway, that's why I think what I think is the best way to put what Trevor was saying, Bray. It's that if we have fewer people handling more stuff, there's so much more that could go wrong. If I mishandle my $1, that's $1 in 1 million that's been mishandled, and so on.
That is precisely what I was saying. Yeah.
So let me put a little bit more about my perspective or my viewpoint into perspective.
Yes, I want to hear.
So I know it can come across like I'm some staunch anti-capitalist or something like that. Well, I'm not an ANCAP. That would be an anarcho-capitalist.
I know. I just threw it out there.
But yeah. Anyways, so. And I'm glad that Trevor ended off saying that we probably need to talk about necessity, and so that's a great segue to another thing on my notes here, because I'm not a staunch anti-capitalist. Like I said, I think capitalism does really good things for economic growth. I just don't think that it should be, let's say, responsible for certain things. I don't think that. Like I've mentioned already, I don't think that people's health should be for profit. I work somewhere where we cater to pharmaceutical representatives who come in and entertain medical personnel, doctors, nurses, different people like that. and they basically, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Suck up to them as much as possible, buy them food, beverages, drinks, alcoholic beverages, and then proceed to try to sell them whatever they have manufactured. And while that seems harmless, like at a glance, you're like, well, yeah, they're a business. They make, you know, drugs or medical devices that make people feel better. Why shouldn't they be able to market those? It's like, okay, sure. But this is people's health we're talking about, not their new automobile or, you know, some other recreational thing. Like, it's not like it's a new set of golf clubs. We're talking about something that affects someone's actual well-being, like, directly. And so that's why I kind of get a sour taste in my mouth whenever these occur.
Yes.
Can I rebut
Go
a
ahead.
little bit, Bray?
So did I. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
sure, yeah.
I want to head off, brother. Winslow's in the Lego bag. I want to head this off, right? By its simplest explanation. Okay. So this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? And Bray, in order for you to convince me that, by the way, medicine for profit is an awful and ugly thing, or whatever, okay? Obviously, it would be immoral to make money off the plague, right? But that's exactly what Walmart's doing, and we need to talk about it.
But here's what's really messed up. That's how you.
Time out.
It's all right here.
What I really want to talk about is this. Me and Trevor are still going to have this problem. Let's say that you get together 100 people, 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people. I don't care. As long as it's like in that ballpark or that range of magnitudes. Let's say you have these thousands of people that get to decide by government mandate who gets what treatment. Okay? Medical science is constantly evolving. They will never be up to date, ever. In fact, they will be 20 years past, because this is a government program we're talking about. They will be hilariously out of date, you know. And then on top of that, once again, this is the problem. Let's say that these few people get to decide what medical technologies will be invested in, and so on, then that means we're missing so much opportunity otherwise. What I'm trying to say ultimately is, maybe it's a good thing that these medical companies are trying to suck up to the investor, because they're trying to sell a product that could work. Products that work are the ones that will eventually be invested in more. And so
I will say yes, and I have one very short sentence to add on top of that.
Sure.
It is sickening. It is sickening to make money off of the plague. It is, but that is in fact how you cure the plague. That is how you do it. If you create another, I am unaware of a system which can successfully do it at such an efficient scale. We exist in a system now. Well, here's an example. My girlfriend, she's currently in Africa, helping people at hospitals, that sort of thing, just volunteer work. And while she's out there, there are people that are like delivering babies and that sort of thing at night with the flash of an iPhone to be able to see while they're delivering a baby. It's quite heinous. It's quite bad. And we're yes, we're at a different scale now. We're in a system that has problems. I hate the way that our medical system is. I don't like the way that it's working, but it is certainly better than alternatives that I'm presently aware of. We just need to improve it further. That's essentially what my argument would be.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, it sounded like you were about to go like somewhere deep with that. No, okay, yeah. So I this is why I enjoyed reading this, and this is a book called Sickening by Dr. John Abramson, and it's because this was like what I needed to know, like the next step of this conversation that we're having right now, which is basically the inner workings of how a medical company, and the fun fact is, I actually read the book by Albert Bourla. It's the CEO of Pfizer.
Sure.
Basically, the guy who made the COVID vaccine happen. And I actually read his book about that. Right, more or less. I read his book on that first. And, he makes himself out to be this sort of big savior guy. And he's like, oh, we're not going to charge this. And we're only going to make this deal if they can bring the cost down to here or whatever. And then, of course, I read this. And this guy's like, yeah, that's only half the story, yada, yada, yada. It's a concern for me to put, say, the cure to the plague in the hands of somebody who has not the core interest of that corporation is not to cure people of the plague. It is to sell as many vaccines for the plague as possible, no matter the cost, not financial cost. I mean, like actual, like
inhuman cost.
Right. One of my favorite excerpts, not to stay on this healthcare thing too long because I want to get back into the broader thing at hand, but just for one of these things like I have written down is corporate responsibility. Whenever something happens, typically malfeasance or something, the word I'm looking for, something goes wrong and it is a corporation's fault. Typically individuals are not punished. Whereas, if a corporation does something wrong and people die as a result, the corporation is punished. But if I do something wrong and people die as a result, I myself am directly punished and I can go to prison for a very long time. To make a long story short, in this book, it talks about, couldn't remember the pharmaceutical company off the top of my hand, but back in, 20 years ago, a drug was made. I believe it's called Vioxx. And this drug ended up killing as many people as died in the Vietnam War could be linked to their use of Vioxx. And the corporation that developed Vioxx was fined a fraction of the total money that they profited by selling Vioxx. And that was it. Scot-free. So they're still manufacturing stuff today.
Here's my question.
And this is what I mean. Go ahead.
Here's my question on that instance right there.
Sure.
So would it not be prudent then? Because here's what I would do, okay? If I was just supreme leader or whatever, okay? Right? And by the way, dear listener, whenever you hear people say that, that's usually them, being ridiculous, all right? But in this instance, just go along with me, okay? If I could just make the law however I want, I would argue that since it is illegal to make it in this country, it is illegal to make money off of a criminal, off of crime, I should say. It is totally illegal to make money off of a crime. You cannot do that in this country. Well, they should seize 100% of their profits. You see what I mean? Like the law should be adjusted accordingly. In other words,
yes.
Why not just change that? Why not just nationalize all of that profit and hand it back to the people?
And I would be happy with direction like that. It's just I'm just pointing out that this is something that does exist and does happen. And another way, part of this is shifting the power from corporate interests to government interests. The corporation only has the corporation's interest at heart. Whereas the government, whether it performs it well or not, in your opinion, has the interest of everyone in mind. The government, well, we've talked about corruption. The government may do things for the government's sake, meaning, or you know what I mean, like for people in government's benefit and only them. But their purpose, as I've defined on here plenty of times, is to ensure the well-being of everyone.
That's literally the first line in the Constitution,
right?
It's in there somewhere. You know what I mean?
The whole point of what I was trying to get at is basically this in this sentence: is some things should not be for profit purely. Some things should be provided for people at a bare minimum. even if it's not a lot, there should be something to fall
if
back
not for
on.
free.
Right, and that's what part of this book that I've been reading is about. It's called Utopia for Realists. I think it came off the press back in 16 or 17, and it's about 3 different things: how we can build the ideal world, universal basic income, which we've spoken about on the podcast before. Great episode, go watch it, listener, if you have not yet. Open
Which turned,
borders,
of course, into universal basic services.
right, which is exactly what I'm talking about now. Is
Yes,
perhaps some things should not be just for profit. Perhaps I shouldn't, Trevor, you may be familiar. There's a lot of people pissed off at Gavin Newsom for selling California out to PG&E. The energy provider, I believe it is, or something like that, and their costs for energy and stuff is like out the wazoo or something like that. I don't live there. I couldn't, take it with
Honestly,
a grain of salt.
I don't
What I'm
remember off the
saying
top
there,
of my
but
head, but point well taken. Nevertheless,
but anyways, I've only gotten through the UBI part of this, or almost finished with it, but it makes a lot of the same points that I would.
So
anyway,
about,
yeah,
yes.
Go ahead, and I'm going to find the next thing that we can talk about if you don't bring us there.
Go for it. Normally, until recently, the argument I would always return to here is that all of these systems are all well and good. UBI, UBS, all that sort of thing. It's all great until you run out of other people's money. That's usually the way I look at it. Up until recently, it was always
no such
something
thing as a free lunch.
Exactly. There's no such thing as a free lunch. There's
that's
all this
a law
money.
Of nature, not a law of economy.
Exactly.
That's a law of nature.
There's no such thing as a free lunch. And that's usually my perspective on most of these things. Like, it's not a universal basic income that you receive free. It's money that's either handed back to you or was taken from somewhere else that you may have it for this time. In a decade, will we remain solvent? Hard to say. That's usually the perspective that I have. However, recently there's been some changes, like actual noteworthy changes in the last month. So here's the example I'll use. In Texas, they're called Mark IIIs. Purportedly, Tesla is going to start using their Mark III bipedal robots in their factories, replace humans with them. Now you can watch them work. It's really quite straightforward. They're bipedal robots, and they walk very slowly compared to a human being. But here's the catch: 24 hours a day, dude.
They don't have to be paid.
They don't think. They don't do anything. They don't stop and talk to their friend. They just go, like, there's like a example they use of a table with like 36 cylinders that need to be moved over there and then align in such a way. And they move slowly. They go and they walk to where they need to go.
But it's methodical.
It's methodical. It never stops. There's no breaks. There's no lunch. There's no
unions.
There's no unions. Most certainly not. And apparently, they only cost roughly $10,000 to make each. $10K.
That's less than one person's salary.
I could buy. I want to buy one. Like, that's my first thought. Like, I would want to clean my house.
This is what I want to say about that real quick. Just real quick.
Yes.
This is where I completely understand what Bray is talking about. That is so clearly.
You've preempted me. Yeah.
That is so clearly pro-profits, anti-human. You know what I mean?
What I'm saying is we're completely detaching the problem of a free lunch. We've discussed this in this podcast before. We're completely tossing out the notion of a free lunch in this way, because it's no longer about, well, you don't get a free lunch. It's, well, humans get a free lunch. There isn't a free lunch per se, but the robots are doing all of it, and here we are. There is no free lunch, that's to be sure, but you can be damn sure that my butler robot, Watson, damn well made that ham sandwich just the way I like it, dude. It set it up.
Here's my thing.
And that is what I'll be naming my robot. Just letting y'all know.
Yeah, but here's my thing, right? And this is what confuses me a lot of times. I do not understand the logic behind these companies so easily getting rid of their human workforce.
It's so much. Yes.
It's such a short time. All you need to do, dear listener, is go to any grocery store where they claim to keep the prices low, and they're still just getting worse. Yep. And they have fewer and fewer human employees in there.
Self-checkout.
And what I'm trying to say is that what profits do you think you're about to make when literally no one can afford it? You see what I mean? Like what? Sure,
Well, they
like
hold you.
it's
Yes.
what the problem for me is all these people. It's like our culture is obsessed with its art, with its movies, with its economy, with everything, with short-term gains. I hate it. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot stand it. It's like, seriously, if you have no human employees and no humans are being paid to do this work, and so on and on and on, there are fewer and fewer people who can afford your product. I just don't understand.
It's
You know
wiping
what I
out the
mean?
middle class. That's what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys get what I
Yes.
mean here. It's all about that short-term money grab scheme, but
Right.
there's no long-term planning involved. I
Well,
swear to
that's
God.
yeah.
Yes. So the issue that we enter in now, and the conversation that we need to have about UBI and UBS is, well, okay, well, robots now just make everything in the factory now. One guy can own it, and all the
Including
money
other
can go to
robots.
him, including, yeah, exactly. The whole thing is unilaterally a pyramid. It goes straight up to the top to one gentleman sitting up there with like a Scrooge McDuck
With 100% of the wealth.
fortune. Yeah,
That's what I'm
exactly.
saying. He's the only one who can afford groceries now. That's
Right.
what I'm trying to say.
It's like trickle down economics, except all the money
They
just
put all
goes
the way up.
Yeah. All the money keeps on going up, and then like the glass up top that you fill with water just expands in volume because the everything down below, the small businesses that this company would have sent into, or the people that they would have paid as workers are gone. It's completely gone. It becomes purely and only just a subset of white collar work with some people on top, just small little administrative duties, which themselves are reducing due to just artificial intelligence. So it
And Trevor,
becomes
honestly,
yes.
this is what Bray could say to rebut our argument, where our
That's what I'm
argument
saying.
of
Yes,
fewer and fewer hands controlling all the power, all the
yes.
money.
It comes right
I
back to
mean,
it.
that's
Right.
It's
what
from
we've
the
been
other
doing.
angle. It came right back to where we started, to our
I
main
haven't
antithesis argument.
explicitly made that point, but that would have been something that I would have said.
We're
is
headed
that
there anyway.
This is exactly what's depicted in the IPs like Cyberpunk, is that all of that, the government doesn't exist anymore in the same capacity in that
Right.
universe. It's greatly weakened compared to these mega corporations, because the corporations have now taken all the money and they have all the power, and that already exists in our in our country. This is lobbying. This
To a
is
degree.
this is where all of these financial interests are pouring money into people and other super PACs and organizations to get people elected that will do whatever they want to ensure that the money keeps flowing. You see it in oil and gas. You see it in typical commercial
The
products.
spice must flow.
Exactly. But this is the way that things are. And just like, for example, government bailouts. Like, what the hell is that? We're going to use public money to assist a failing private corporation. Why should we rely
Why should we
on a
foot the bill?
private business for something to do with my survival?
Exactly.
Why should I have to rely on that? And then the private business fails, then where am I going to get X? If I can't provide for myself. And this is a little side note on that, is that I really heavily fuck with self-sustainability.
Yes.
I love the idea, like, whatever happened to that thing back in the, what was it, like a Freedom Garden or whatever it's called? Something back in like the World War era, where they were like, here, plant this in your yard for vegetables for like a year, and it was like everybody should do it, kind of thing. Like, yeah, that's incredible. I think anybody who has the capability should, with their own private income, try to do whatever. Solar power is a big, huge thing right now, and I'm really happy that it's popular as it is, and I hope more people do it, because it takes them at their most fundamental ground level off of the reliance from both corporations and the government. It gives them like a first layer of defense against the world, against life.
Well,
and then next should be the government. It's like, oh, I don't have any solar panels. How am I going to get energy? Well, I think the government should have a hand in giving you some set amount. Do you need more? You can buy from the government, or maybe you can get some from some corporation that'll sell it to you cheaper or something. Like, I don't think that things that you need to survive should be solely, you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, competition, free market, let it run for things like the iPhone or shoes or
look, I think we can all agree, literally all three of us, that these super monopolies that we are literally living with right now need to go. I mean, like, I see these Reddit posts like once a week on completely unrelated subreddits about like, it'll have this graph, right, about who owns who. And it's like, here's all of the companies that Coke owns. Here's all of the companies that Nestle owns. Here's all of the companies that so and so owns. It's like, okay, make it stop. Like, for the love of Christ, make it stop.
What we need is another Theodore Roosevelt, like I was saying. We need somebody that comes in with a pair of spectacles and a big grin and just slashes these things
Trump
in half.
is one of them, and Biden is 100,000 years old.
I don't think,
neither one of them are going to do this that we're talking about.
If we want to talk about that, if you want to talk about that, have y'all seen the what's it called, the quote unquote real debate with RFK that went up? Did y'all see that?
I did see some of his.
I watched half of the Trump and Biden debate.
Oh, don't watch that one.
And stopped.
Seriously,
enough was enough.
I've had some like ringing alarm bells in my head this entire conversation, because like literally these are all just RFK's talking points. Like, if you ever look into him, this is all he ever talks about.
Right.
He's usually just talks about how like the pharmaceutical companies have seized everything, and like everything is like seized by corporate interest in the American system, and we need to like pull out money from like the defense budget, and we need to like start paying for infrastructure again. I'm not telling you to go. I'm not telling the audience, hey, this podcast is brought to you by RFK. I'm not trying to do that. But like seriously though,
insert
if you haven't
fanfare.
looked into him, exactly, insert fanfare here. But like it kind of ringing some alarm bells for me in that regard. Anyway, total aside.
No, you're absolutely right. I took a look at RFK's platform and I was like, there's a lot of good stuff here. It's the unfortunate truth of that. Again, there's too much power concentrated in both the Democratic and Republican National Convention.
I don't agree with RFK on a lot of things, but I really like that if he does get elected, it'll finally pull the rug out from underneath this bipolar political system that we have. It'll actually do something wonderful, and I think that would be in itself a worthwhile venture. It would.
I'm of the opinion that things do need to be shaken up, if not turned completely upside down and slammed against a brick wall.
Exactly.
I just think it's going to take more than somebody simply running third party and saying, please vote for me in order to do that.
Yeah.
It's going to take a massive effort. Like, we're simply going to, like, okay, dear listener, I want you to know my perspective on this. I think it would be pretty easy to say that I've been on the more conservative side of things for like forever, okay? Especially when it comes to the federal institution, okay? And I'm very guilty of suggesting that, like, I would not mind a powerful government at a local level, but I have a great distaste for hardly any power at even the state level. And I certainly don't want the federal level to have any power in my daily life whatsoever.
Right.
And key point there, daily life. Obviously, I'm very interested in them doing what the Constitution provides, providing defense, roads, and so on. But what I'm trying to say here is that what finally made me start thinking about these things over again was COVID. I mean, like, you're just looking around, and it's like there's only so much that the supply and demand curve can excuse. Like, everybody's hurting. Everybody. And it's just like prices are just getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
because
like,
they get away with it. Quite simply.
That's what I'm trying to say. And then, okay, fuck it. Let's say that the supply and demand shit excused 100% of it. Let's steel man that argument. Why didn't they go back down?
Actually, there's a story there.
Why in the fuck did they not taper back down.
Yes.
Now that we're kind of over the big hump. Obviously, COVID's still a big problem, but like now that we're over the big hump because of our fantastic science technology.
Yes.
Why?
Well, and I'll say just one little short thing about that real quick, Trevor, is just a rhetorical.
Yes.
Exactly. Why, if somebody is willing to pay this now, why would I ever, unless for competitive reasons, lower my price if I'm making more money? If I don't have to, Trevor.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is I have an actual story about this. Local in the area of like the Bay Area in California, like Northern California, a whole bunch of companies, like really big companies. Safeway, that's like the twin parent. There's Monopoly, of course, so like the twin parent of like Kroger as well. If anyone is more familiar with Kroger, Safeway, I believe Walmart, and two other really really large groceries around here had to completely slash the prices of over like 400 items around here about 2 months ago. The reason being that nobody was going in anymore because they had literally sky high launched all of the prices. People all just unilaterally went, I'm not going to the store here anymore. I'm going to go somewhere else.
It's going to take,
and they were losing
all of these people.
Like
that's what it's going to take.
Yeah, like literally,
I mean, it's going to be so hard, but I know that's what it's going to take.
It is, and people are just going to vote with their wallet in a sense, and it's going to break these things apart. And I think that's essentially what's going to happen in the end. Things are worth what people pay for them, and it just comes down to
that purchasing power I was talking about.
Exactly. Someone somewhere else will be willing, and this comes to actually a silver lining of the free enterprise system. Somewhere around the world, in this highly globalized, in this internet age economy, will be offering this thing to you at a different price. Here's an example I have for you. I came to California in the middle of COVID, or like right on the tail end, and I walk up to it into a Safeway. I go over and I see a thing of oatmeal. I love oatmeal. I eat it every day. And I have this buy like a little container this big, and it was literally like $12 fucking. This was $12. I was in disbelief.
And it cost 2 dirty nickels to make.
Yeah, exactly.
Swear to God.
Exactly. 2 dirty nickels that you could rub together barely.
Yeah, I mean,
they stick together.
Like the faces are gone off of them.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of worth. And they charge that much for it. I'm like, who the fuck do these people think they are? And then I went over to instead I went to Costco, and like Costco is another one, but like, essentially, if you buy in bulk, it's considerably more affordable. I bought something that was 4 times the size for like literally $8, and it was like that. And just like that, guess who never goes to Safeway? I live like fairly close to a Safeway. You never would see me go to the fucking thing ever, because it's just heinous prices, and these places drown. And I'm glad they do. They don't deserve business. They don't. If they charge prices like this, it's absolutely ridiculous. They think they can get away with it, and then they drown belly up because they're so totally incompetent. They thought that they could do stuff like this.
But like I say, it's once again about those short-term gains, about that fiduciary obligation. I mean, seriously, once again, it's just a total lack of forethought.
Yes. I have one thought to have. It's a bit of an aside, but it's a thought I've been having recently when it comes to like just economic systems generally across the world. So I had recently saw a really really in-depth exploration of economic systems the other day. It wasn't too long, but it was good depth. It was like 30 minutes long. That explored this YouTube video. It's called like something economics. This YouTube channel, and I saw this video. It was really interesting, and they explored. Up until this point, you could generally speaking generalize societies into like 3 different subsets. It's a bit like a ladder system where one thing would become another, and that's generally speaking the way that most economic systems around the world has performed. Number 1, you have an agricultural system where most people that are alive are working in terms of agriculture. It takes like so many people to produce like just enough wheat to get by. Then eventually you have industrialization, to which you have an economy such as like the United States in the 1940s, where most people that live in the country work in the industrial base, producing things like steel, and basically
literally
the
so Industrial Revolution.
Exactly. Exactly. And basically what had happened was, it wasn't that we were producing less food. It was that we became so efficient at producing food that one person could do the work of 100 men in the past. We have like these tractors.
100 years ago or whatever.
100 years ago, exactly. So we've become so efficient at producing food. The necessary amount of people it took to produce food just went, and the amount of farmers in America as a ratio compared to 1850, insane. They're still there. They produce enough for all of us. It's now a small subset.
And you know what's sad, Trevor, by the way?
Yes.
Just side note.
Please.
Even though these farmers feed everybody here, I mean, a lot of them are suffering.
Yeah, they're quite poor. They're quite poor.
And it should not be that way. It should. I mean, they literally feed all of us. It's like, what the fuck? What are we smoking? It's like, if they decide to quit, what do we do?
Well, that becomes quite complicated, because it becomes a question of like where the rubber hits the road. Like if they want to charge more for what they pay, then we would therefore necessarily have to pay more for our oatmeal. It's a whole conversation. But
what I'm trying to say is there's so few of them. If they wanted just more money to survive on, because some of them are genuinely crippled, it would be a drop in the bucket type of thing. It would be a drop in the bucket type of thing.
Well, very often if they do try to upcharge their prices, such as like a guy who sells raspberries, the guy next door who's still selling it for less for an equivalent efficiency and equivalent quality, that's free enterprise. Anyway, so you have an agricultural base, and then you have this industrial base that suddenly arrives, where most people are working in the industrial base, producing steel, producing cars, producing things, the world of things. And that was the United States during the 1940s. But then something else happened, something really interesting that you and I exist in now. This is going to sound very familiar. You have what happens after that, what you could call an information era, where instead of that, essentially we become so efficient at producing our industrial base. We become so efficient at producing things such as steel, such as everything else. You have even that number shrinks dramatically in proportion to the overall ratio of the population. And everybody just starts moving into what you would call white collar work, such as like running analyses and running statistics and working in white collar work, trying to make movements of material from one place to another. All of a sudden, the population now works in this new area where most people aren't working in industry. Most people aren't working in agriculture.
They're working in services.
They're working in services. They're working at coffee shops. They're working with people. They're working with data. They're not producing an item. They're producing information. They're exchanging information, and that essentially becomes what we exist in now. Now, the reason why I brought up all this, that's where the video ends. But the reason why I bring up all of this, listener, both of y'all, is it seems to me, as we see suddenly the entire base come out right up from under us, both in terms of agriculture and industry getting completely replaced by robotics. And then information gets severely brought up in efficiency, like with artificial intelligence, and our ability to be able to reach out and do things has increased so dramatically. Like I do research. I work in a neuroscience lab. I am so many more times, like it's on a logarithmic scale, how much more efficient I am now compared to the way I was before ChatGPT and all the other things were introduced. It makes you question, like, what is that fourth era? And are we entering into it where it has become so efficient to produce our entire industrial base?
These jumps and eras are happening faster as we go.
Yes, and that basically what I'm trying to say is that small ratio of the population that's working in agriculture is about to go from this much of the population, like that much, it's
already
shrink.
That much.
Yeah, and the same thing's going to happen for industry. It's going to shrink,
right?
Where everyone will be either working in the information economy, or what else are we going to be doing? That's the question.
That is the perfect.
Things are shrinking, and that's where you have things such as UBI and UBS saying, well, if the entire industrial base is entirely done by robotics, or like almost all of it is, and like the ratio of humanity is so monumentally tiny compared to any other point in human history, you begin to start talking about things such as the government completely taking over subsets of it because it's already completely operationalized. It's really quite complicated, much more so than that, because then you have to go like, well, what if there are other businesses that want to try out producing steel in more efficient methods, entirely automatic, but nevertheless more efficient? And that becomes a question of other forms of capital within a free enterprise society. It's more complicated than that, but it becomes very interesting.
So thank you for that too, because Trevor's just so good at getting the segues. So let's talk about one more thing before we leave here, with the time that we have. And what I want to talk about, what I would really like to ask is, what do you think about the concept of the American dream? And the reason that I ask that is that where I want to segue from what Trevor's talking about, and industry and things are shrinking, and we're getting back into this conversation about UBI, UBS, and what the hell are people going to do, and all these jobs keep getting taken over by these corporations that are employing these practices that make them a lot of money, but then we don't have a job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think about this right here. This is American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. And if you haven't seen the movie is fantastic. This is the book itself. But to me, because it really does have a lot of potential interpretations, but to me, American Psycho is a great dive into what this sort of environment creates of people who let it consume them. This is, and I'm trying to put this in a corner against what I get out of this book and other books, and this is In Defense of Liberalism by D.A. Lloyd Thomas. This is the book, and I mentioned this on the podcast before, and I was trying to find it before we got started while you guys were talking about Star Trek. There's a thing in this book talking about people. One of the core chapters in this is things about intrinsic value, and how that's such a strong cornerstone of liberalism, is recognizing things with intrinsic value. A great example is art. We would want to foster art for art's sake, because we believe that it's valuable. We appreciate it. We don't just appreciate it for commercial value. But one of the things in here is talking about, and I can't remember the word, and I remember the last time I talked about it on the podcast, I couldn't remember the word, but it was a word that described the type of work, the type of job that you would work, such as if you were, I don't know, like a barista, or you did restaurant work, or you did something maybe you would consider, not that those are necessarily mundane, but some sort of job that you are not doing purely for the satisfaction of that job. You are doing that job as a means to an end for something else, such as paying your bills, or being able to keep the lights on. You don't get any intrinsic value, so to speak, out of performing that job. You get value out of what that job provides to you monetarily, so you can get out of something else. It is a roundabout way of me trying to put it. To me, American Psycho is about the people who try to take those kinds of jobs and make those the actual value, like putting the value in a job like Wall Street
and it's
person.
Disgusting. It's
and
meant
it
to be.
fuels consumerism and just individualism, and all of these things that are exemplified in this book and film. Whereas what I like, such as what I've been reading in here in Utopia for Realists, the 15-hour work, or not 15-hour work week, excuse me, universal basic income, which I'm sure has a lot to do with 15-hour work week and what I'm about to say. They talk about some studies that have been performed in North America having to do with universal basic income, where they just give people a bunch of money for no reason. They just give it to them, and they see these dramatic increases. Yeah, they see these dramatic increases in their well-being, and the things that they do with this money is really beneficial. For example, some people with that extra money, they didn't have to work as often, and they can take that money and put it, and they start taking a dance class or a painting class, or they were able to do an extra year of university or something because of this money that had been given to them. It's the embrace of things that have this sort of value that I'm trying to talk about, that is made possible by focusing on our well-being as opposed to our overall like wealth and profit. I I'm trying to tie it all together. You know, like in the last episode, I was like, I have so many thoughts.
Well, real quick, Ray, let me give you a break and you can assemble more. Dear listener, we were talking a great deal about Star Trek before this came on, and it is so neat that we're able to tie this in. For those of you who don't know, in Star Trek, there's no such thing as personal property. There is no such thing as money. There are things that you collect, but if they got stolen, you'd only wonder where they went. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't go that far. There's certainly personal property. If somebody took Picard's,
if someone,
it's been real, everyone. Thanks for this episode.
No, I mean it. If someone,
so do I.
If someone took Picard's flute, okay, everybody knows Picard's flute.
Yes.
If someone took Kirk's glasses, if someone took Janeway's Olmec mask or whatever,
right,
they would seriously not worry that much about it.
No, they most certainly would.
I'm telling you, they are so not worried about scarcity. You know what I mean?
They're certainly not. That part is correct. Yes.
You know, but, what I mean to say, people, is the concept of personal property is not as extreme as the ones that we have.
I completely sympathize with. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
for example, like Picard's flute,
they are not worried. You know what I mean?
Yes. It's not so cut and dry as they have no personal. If somebody took, for example, in one particular episode of TNG, The Next Generation, Picard's, one of his mentors at the Academy, who was like an archaeologist, gave him this piece of ancient archaeological find, which is this thing. Basically, it's like a priceless artifact. If some dude on the ship thought it'd be funny to piss all over it and shoot it out an airlock, I don't think Picard would be having a very nice day. So I wouldn't say that they have no sense of personal property, but I would state that it's certainly not to such an extent that we have now. That I completely sympathize with.
Right. Yeah. But so my point in this is that it's an idea on what it looks like when there's no scarcity. We are not there, but scarcity is becoming something less and less that we deal with by the science and technology that we have. And maybe that's a bad thing. We understand that that's polluting the environment for one case. Another very substantial argument that, it makes me sound like a gym bro. I don't care, but it's a very substantial argument. Our species is not well ordered for having no scarcity. No species is. I mean, it's a biological fact that in nature is scarce. And if we have this, if we have abundance, if we have so much abundance that scarcity is not a big deal, it's like a lot of us have this thought in our head that, no, we have to have scarcity. We can move past that. We can grow beyond that. I know we can.
Yes, that's a good point. I have here's an analogy to that. I have a Brita filter that I have right next to my sink that I fill up and I use for water. If there are certain periods of human history and certain places that, if given the opportunity to have access to something like that, clean drinking water and that much,
they would kill.
Somebody would literally take it and drink it until there was nothing left in it. I don't care how big your Brita filter is. They would drink and they would drink and they would drink and they would drink and they would drink.
Having no idea how to stop.
Completely. And that would be their entire world. Or if
it would be like if we were transported into Star Trek land, we would not know how to stop consuming food. For those of us who don't know, things that you get at the replicator in Star Trek cannot make you fat. They literally can't, even though they're fat people in the show. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. That's a caveat of the 90s, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yes, that's one of those things where I think people adjust, and it becomes, instead of a frame of reference, we have scarcity on the mind. Is that to say that scarcity is part of the human? This reminds me of a meme, but anyway, is that to say that scarcity is inherent to the human condition, or scarcity just an attribute of the human condition up until this point? What comes next? Will we look for something else? such that like you and I we're not pining over water, you and I, or food for that matter. We're pining over obesity, but that's a different thing. We have things that we want, things that we feel the need to attain, that we need to work towards and develop and improve. That you could think of, you can visualize scarcity in that context. And if you do so, it becomes a question of, well, what do you do when you run out? It reminds me of Dostoevsky, who, when told something or rather of socialism, said that makes no sense. Are we just going to sit around and eat cake and write
Let them eat
literary?
cake.
Yeah, are we just going to? Yeah, right. Yeah. But basically, are we just going to eat cake and write literary analyses? Is that what expected of us?
Yes.
That had happened to me in my life. That, of course not. That's a ridiculous statement, isn't it? Because so many people in this world that you've met. Like I remember one time I was hanging out near this area where a lot of people go near where I live, where like students at the university I work at. Should I just say where? I mean, it's a giant university. I feel like I can. It doesn't. I suppose it doesn't really matter. So at the university I work at, there is a student that's passing out papers for socialism, and saying like, well, the working class do this, this, and that. And I can kind of tell that this person, this guy, if he had met someone in the working class, you could tell he probably would absolutely despise them. You know, like the kind of person that I think of when I think of the working class, I think of people who, if they don't like something, it's gay. You know what I mean? That's gay. You know, that kind of guy. That kind of guy is not the kind of person that this guy would get along with. It's really quite complicated. There are people want all sorts of things. People like NASCAR. People like racing things. People like things that are quite complicated that go beyond just eating cake and writing literary analyses. People are quite complicated, and trying to fit that complication into something such as, are we always going to have scarcity? It's hard to understand where to go from here and where things go fundamentally. We've hit a moment where there are too many variables at play to be able to actually say anything substantive. And with that, I think I'll stop there.
No, well said. I guess we can go ahead and wrap up. I'll say something first, I guess, since Trevor just had a bit to say. I say everything I say today in this episode, and I brought this forward as the topic because as we continue to dive into this death spiral of progress or not, however you want to view it, progress in the sense of time marching on and us continuing to develop things that fundamentally change our way of life, I wonder, will we turn toward, some new form of governance or some new form of economic environment that is not concerned about making these corporations a bunch of money, but instead based on some sort of structure that ensures the well-being of all people, at least first, and then go free run, do whatever you want to do with your market. I didn't get to mention this, but something about capitalism that's necessary is this overwhelming consumerism. There's plenty of memes out there about the iPhone and how a new one comes out like every so often, and it's got like, oh, the better camera for the 15th time in a row and such, and you just have to keep buying a new one and keep buying, because if you don't keep buying, the economy doesn't work. And it seems like there could be something fundamentally flawed with that. Given in a capitalist system, the economy runs because people are spending money on things. And if you don't have a new product to buy, then how's it going to work?
It's the psychopathy of consumerism. That's
right.
what American Psycho is about. Like
exactly.
You said.
If there's any place there that it exists, it's here. And there's a phrase I mentioned a few episodes ago, I think, and it's that I would rather live in a world where I work in order to live, not live in order to work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everybody wants that. That's the new American dream.
Right. I don't want to succumb to this where I live to work, because that has become my entire being. I want to work in order to live. That should be my main focus.
Yes.
And
That's
that's why
one. Yeah,
yeah,
please.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I meant to say, like, that's one thing that the American dream never got, too. That I think is we have something that's far superior to what the American dream was. The American dream was to, like, own property. I mean, I think we ideally we get back to that, but to own a house and work a job and be able to afford the house and provide income for your family.
Mm-hmm.
That's all well and good, but I think the factor that we have left out that I think is quite important is you work a job to afford those things. Yes, but it's a job that you actually want to do.
Right.
Yes.
What is freedom to the American? Is it the freedom to go to work at some mundane job that you don't really enjoy to make money, some smidgen of money compared to the person who, writes your check, or the person who is 15 ladder rungs underneath the person who owns the company that writes your check? So you can take that measly amount of money and try to do something for, 1 or 2 weeks out of every year of your life and enjoy yourself, to sit down once every year and eat cake and write a literary analysis or go see a movie, or whatever you actually want to be doing with the very short amount of time you have here? Or is freedom taking so much responsibility off of yourself and say, have the collective government provide you things that you need at a very basic level, or give you a universal basic income so that you have some sort of safety net and you don't have to rely on some entity who is only looking out for themselves and not for you? And so that you can do things, maybe like have a 15-hour work week, so you have more time to do things that you actually want to do with your life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
You know what I am obviously reminded of here? For those of us who've read the book Jurassic Park,
Mm.
of course, the movie does a good job, but not a great one. The book does a great job. The book is not about dinosaurs; it's about humans. Otherwise, it would not be a human tale. Ian Malcolm is sitting there, literally on his deathbed, and he's talking about what improvements have we made. And Dr. Sattler says, "Well, I mean, this, that, and the other. We have dishwashers, I guess, and this, that, and the other." And Ian Malcolm's like, cavemen could work 20 hours a week, and after that, go play, go,
Mm-hmm.
literally go make music, literally go make cave paintings, literally go play with their friends and family, this, that, and the other. What improvements are you talking about? You know what I mean? And that was his argument. Of course, nowadays we need antibiotics, and people need to work probably a bit longer than 20 to make that sort of thing possible, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
now that we have so many people, maybe I could walk that back and say, maybe we don't need to work a 20-hour work week to make that possible, or whatever. My
Mm-hmm.
point is that I'm reminded by that sentiment there. It's like, we talk about progress and improving and so on, and this boomer argument that people just aren't willing to work anymore. It's like, that's bullshit.
Yeah,
I,
we don't want to
I'm
play by the same rules anymore.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I read somewhere, and do not quote me on this, but I think Americans are working longer hours now than ever. I mean,
We work
and
quite
making
hard.
less
Yeah.
money. We're
No,
making a
people
lot less
boast
money.
working, these 60-hour work weeks or whatever, and I can't imagine, or I don't understand why people boast of this. I'm like,
Well, so
you are
Brayton,
proud of.
let me explain that a little bit. I think it would be safe to say that I'm a more conscientious person than you are. So all that, or industrious, or whatever,
Yeah.
all that means, and it's just a different snark personality. All that means is I might have a better ability to self motivate. Whatever. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that does not mean anything except exactly that. It doesn't
Right.
mean you're any better or worse as a person. That's the problem that you and I have, is that when people pretend like they're better or worse because of that quality.
Sure.
But let me explain a little bit
Like
anecdotally.
this.
Exactly.
Like
But
this.
I'm serious. So when I was doing my senior year in undergrad, I was putting in 30 hours minimum uh, at my resident school for my education capstone, and I was putting at least another 30 in between the research I was doing and the work I was taking home. And then I was doing more at home.
Mm-hmm.
I had no time. I had no time whatsoever. I tell my students all the time, I'm like, people, I had my life planned down to the hour because that's what it took.
Right.
Here's the thing that I will tell all of my closest friends, and now you listener as well, and Bray here. There was a very big part of me that enjoyed it. There's a very big part of me that enjoyed working all the time. And that's because of my level of conscientiousness. I know that's because of it, but there's a darker side to that. I liked it because I didn't have to worry about anything else substantially. I didn't have to worry about anything else substantive in my life. I didn't have to worry about my relationship with my boyfriend at the time. I didn't have to worry about my relationship with my mother. Didn't have to worry about my relationship with my sisters or my friends or my family. I missed so much life. I missed
the individualism.
I missed the birth of who I consider my niece. I missed the birth of the person who is my niece. I missed so much in just 1 year of 60-hour work week. And I loved it. I'm telling you, but then I looked back and I said, what the fuck am I doing? Like, how can I continue this practice? And then, of course, now I'm employed by the state as a teacher, and I'm thinking...
That's a whole nother...
I'm thinking, oh my God, like, how am I supposed to get all this work done in 45? You know what I mean? It is truly psychotic. It's neurotic in the extreme. And, I mean, maybe these will be my last words on it. But, like, you seriously need to take a step back. And like Bray just said, stop playing by these rules. It's like, oh my goodness, live life and do what you can. You know what I mean? And this is what I mean. As a teacher, I should be able to survive. That's a job that is mandated by law.
Right.
You know,
like, has to be one of the top, like, 5 most important jobs. Like, who's gonna tell the new people what to do? Like,
dude, I'm serious. And this is something very impersonal for me to tell you. My job salary is totally public information. I went to Walmart the other day and spent 10% of my paycheck on a single Walmart visit. It's like, this is nuts. This is not just inflation. This is cruelty. This is unabashed cruelty. And it's got to change. That's what this podcast has actually been about, and I'm happy that we came to this part of it.
Conclusion.
And my vote will be that we continue this conversation even as soon as next week, so that so that we continue it, that we don't bury it under other stuff. But anyway, y'all get my point. What is the point in having a job like teaching if you cannot survive on it? And that's why I'm probably not going to teach much longer. I just can't. It's not that I don't want to. I've said on this podcast that if money was no object, I would teach forever.
You would still do it. Yeah.
And it's like, oh my goodness, I cannot survive. I'm in a house with 2 roommates. Well, are you shitting me? Like 20 years ago, I would be looking at houses. What happened? It's like it has to change.
That's a great way to end.
I couldn't have asked for a better way to end that. Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks everybody for listening to this episode. Barely scratching the surface, honestly, of all the places that this sort of conversation can go. But I hope you'll join us next week and many weeks to come. And feel free to check out our backlog of just as equally exciting episodes of Four Mortal Coils. We've been 3 of those 4, and you have been our 4th. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time.